Actually, he doesn't even have one today. No, just Larry's. All right, Steve. Here you go, Larry.
I got a little more.
That's.
Seems like it's a little bit more daylight.
There's a lot of daylight.
Rob, you good on audio? Check 1, 2. Steve, you good? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Larry, how you doing on audio? Everybody good? Mr. Colleen, how are you, sir? Excellent. I like it.
Thank you, Nat.
No problem. You're welcome. Everybody's good? Are you good, sir?
I've just improved.
You just improved.
Yeah. Did you ever leave your mic stand at an event?
I have before, yes. Have to go back and get it. Hope that it's still there.
Most of the time, I assume it's not going to still be there.
Right.
You know, the good news is our engineer guy is just like, nah, it happens.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. They're not as jerky about it as they could be. It's like, yeah, it happens. Yeah. No, I went in one time and was like, once in a while it doesn't turn on. He's like, how old is it? I'm like, 10 years. Like, yeah, here, have a new one.
When the chief law enforcement officer said there's evidence of drug and alcohol, he's seeing it as more than assumption.
Yeah, I want to get deep in the menu system and not be able to recover.
He seems to not understand that there are parallel investigations.
Exactly what I want to do. All I know is I've got some signals in it, so it's not too bad.
He's definitely standing by the.
But it's got every card in it, except I think the right
I wonder if it's just to avoid litigation.
I know.
That department.
So we have areas where you get it,
anything
you know,
from stock
stolen
and
somewhere out in the country.
There's
It's got like
definitely
a
a crisis of cohesiveness there, of communication.
We have 18 years or so.
It really is, yeah.
You know, there's 7 cards. I think we have 6 of those.
Hey, Ray, I like your Heimlich story. That was good.
6 available. Oh, there is one. Oh, there is 2 Verizon. There's 2 Verizon.
Heimlich, sorry,
My bad.
emailed me. He said, and he's directly to his blog, and he's the son of Heimlich. And he wants to know more about it. I don't know, he got some more emails from the guy, so that's all.
That's what we got.
But thank you. The kids, you can't go wrong with the kids.
I just hope.
Yeah, we would spread the money to all the companies, let them have a fair opportunity in grabbing all of our resources and money.
She knows better than that.
I'm not so sure.
I mean, let her talk about the policy too, whatever she's going to do.
Yeah. The internal doesn't last very long.
I mean,
Without that external battery, I would say
it's
I'm
tiny
not
out there
there.
too. I mean,
I don't know if I hang out.
This is probably set up. How did that letter get out?
the
Live music is great if that speaks.
Well, we don't. Hamilton, I think, had it first. And they said that they got the assumption for us. And then as soon as we saw what we all asked,
Originally,
We wired these things out.
Lauren Traeger used to do that.
sure.
Or if you went to the battery, you can switch it to battery.
You was right.
Yeah, Dave had it wired that way somehow, he did it all himself. So you'd think it was nice, but then it didn't work very well. So what happened was, you plug it in, and it wasn't, when you flip it to AC, it wasn't, actually, I don't think it was AC. So, or you forget to flip it or whatever, so you do one hit with it, and then it's like, die. You know, what happened?
Yeah, we had it sort, because it hadn't really, we also needed to get those to average interest.
Yes. That's the way this is now.
We know it through I guess they spent, I don't think it's the back. It's around.
If I remember correctly, Dave told me that the Gero, that was the way it was designed. So there was something to do with why it wasn't charging properly when we plugged it in, so he created that whole toggle switch thing.
I think it's really.
The workaround, he created that.
Runs off the main and internal battery.
Right.
If you have an external battery plugged into it, it takes juice from the internal battery. So the external, well, that I'm not 100% sure, I think it's just sucking, because the external is always charging internal.
Yeah, see, this does not, though. That battery is independent of the internal little battery. It does not charge that. I know that for a fact.
Generally on those days, I go to that side, so I try to reverse it.
Yeah, this is either, so if you plug it in, yes, it recognizes that it's plugged in, and then it will switch to the AC power.
I'd like to.
But before it didn't, and that was the whole thing that they created to make it do that, but it never really worked. It went blue, like you were getting a text message, I thought it was me.
Could have been mine.
Oh, yeah, everything's like,
Well, mine, it couldn't have been. I figured that's the best place for it.
we'll go into the end and monitor the situation. He was kind enough to go out and start our car for us. Did it with keys, I'll turn it on, sit there and watch it run. I'm tempted to go over and start playing the drums. I haven't played the kid a drum. I used to be a drummer. Yeah. Played all through high school. I don't know. I have literally not sat on it since the day we graduated. I haven't touched the straight drums. And I played all 4 years in high school band.
His nickname was the metronome.
The metronome.
He was on time.
Yeah, I was on time. Always on time. Yeah.
Live streaming this?
Yeah. I went to Louis Armstrong Jazz Improvisation Lab. I assume he was in the new school of high school musicians book.
So I better watch my
And look at me now, I'm standing here with you guys.
Oh,
Yeah, I still have it.
Who wants that place right now?
Exactly. Yeah, it was all.
That's funny. I think we the kids go to the same high school. And every time we go to the gym, you know, this soccer.
You got to point it out, so that's the person.
Where's your flag? Neither one of them have one.
Where's your flag?
Where's your flag?
I went to high school so long ago, they took all of our trophies down that we had.
Yeah.
I went in there, I couldn't believe it. I walked to the trophy case, I'm like, wait a minute, what is your flag? We were all, yeah. Took it all down.
It was
Well, we had to make room for the new stuff, that guy told me.
the funniest is when we went to Columbia High School.
Well, what'd you do with it? Throw it in the trash can?
When we went to Columbia High School to do their zone. And they've got all these state vendors and there's a 4-year gap. And Rob points it out. It's because of Duco. He won it for 4
So you
years.
notice there's a 4-year gap there, and all those things.
Or like 82, 86, whatever it was. That's a
why that camera would ever recognize that temperature setting. It's just, these do. Our P2s never did. You were always in no higher than probably about 63. You know, you may touch the 70 once in a while, but 12,000. Oh, they all do, yeah. They do it our place too. No wonder it looks so good. Yeah. I mean, I can fix the light on it. If you want me to, but I mean, there's nothing I can do to make it look like you guys can make it look. Which is so much fun. Watching that render. But yeah, because everybody's shooting a hiatus for a few years. Big bodies still the cameras now. You know, they're shooting the video promo stuff with DSLRs. And then I can't replicate that on this camera. I mean, I can't get that depth of field and that look. Film like at the bottom of the screen. We inquired once about new lenses for these cameras. And you know, we have a whole shelf full of those old good Fujinon lenses we have. And we can't adapt them to these cameras. They don't make an adapter that'll fit those lenses. Now, believe it or not, the cheap Sony EX3s that we have, they do work on there. We could adapt them. These we can't adapt. You know, they had a true glass doubler on them and everything. Got a whole stack of them.
Doesn't have a buzzer on the lens, on the glass.
It's digital. You don't have those, do you? Oh, do you have one? See, I have two. See, Joe doesn't have one. See, he came to me one day. Yeah.
No, he does.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, we all got the cameras.
Yeah, it's got the digital zoom. Yeah, and come to find out, one of these,
So if you go into that,
you guys assigned to the phone. Well, you got that.
there's one, there's two. We get the picture.
Oh, really? I don't even have that. Are you kidding me? How new is that camera? Oh, yeah, here, I just have one, I got a sign here, and it's just like a double. That's all I get. Oh,
This is the digital double. See that?
I worked with a guy who
I got a sign with this switch here, but it's just it's a one-time, yeah. That's my record, that's my record delete button. So those are all signable, you know, you go in the menu system and assign stuff to that. No,
I might be able to reassign it to.
yeah, it gives you a warning. Yeah, so if I press this, it'll say, delete that split. You want to delete that split? And then I hit yes, with the same button, with this button. That's spinning and everything. You're selecting who. But yeah, that's all.
But it does get a little softer. I mean,
Does it get grainy?
no, it doesn't get great. It just gets a little on the soft side.
Yeah, this one kind of does too. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about your hair is focal length at that point. You're so close to it. I mean, there's no room for hair.
Full screen, it's pretty good.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, because some of the guys with these cameras, they don't even have that optical zoom, that digital. Oh, that look. I don't think mine don't have it. Yours don't. So it's kind of a, either you got lucky and got it, or you didn't.
Ray, what do you think my mic's on?
Which is this? Oh, yours.
got a good looking mic stand.
I kind of borrowed it from the choir.
Plus you got the classic mic flag there, kind of scruffed up a little bit. Looks like it's been put through the ringer a few times because you're a hard worker.
Thrown down in disgust in my day.
You put the shoe leather into your job over the years, I can tell you that. Christine Brown.
This is a well-heated big church, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And that'll show you the battery. Well,
You know what the thing is.
You seen court today, right?
Now I'm hearing it's been delayed till tomorrow. Well, his attorney, when I called over there, they said it would be this morning at 9:30. And so we have someone down there, and then now I'm seeing our emails. Might be tomorrow.
Nobody wants to sit in front of church. Oh, me. This is a well-heated church.
Well heated?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning. Ready? You guys ready?
Yeah.
First of all, good morning, everybody. It's a cold morning, but I thank you guys for attending. When I became circuit attorney around January 2017, I made a commitment to the people of the city of St. Louis that this office would pursue public safety with a commitment to equal justice, transparency, and accountability to the community we serve. As a lifelong city resident, I know firsthand the challenges we face as a city, as I also know that a history of high arrest rates, high conviction rates, and lengthy prison sentence stays have not made our city safer. In fact, in many respects, the heavy-handed criminal justice responses of the past have played a significant role in destabilizing families, neighborhoods, and communities in our city. In too many of our communities, this has cut off access to job opportunities, housing, and other basic needs. This is why we are taking a new approach, one where we work with service providers to help address the underlying drivers of crime, including substance abuse disorders, mental illnesses, joblessness, and hopelessness, while reserving our harshest response, incarceration, for those who truly are a danger to our community. 2 years into this time as the Circuit Attorney's Office, we have made significant progress. I have hired a diverse group of well-qualified attorneys and staff who represent the diversity of our city and believe in my vision. I have invested in our employees by making their salaries more competitive, providing training, and providing other resources. I have implemented policy changes to improve decisions concerning intake of warrants, charging, and the outcomes of cases we prosecute. And I continue to examine our data to identify approaches to deploy policies and practices that will result in a more fair and safe city. These effects have been informed by the vision of our local criminal justice system leaders and various members of community that you see behind me, as well as shared input from my staff. For example, in July last year, I was joined by members of the NAACP chapter, Missionary Baptist State Convention of Missouri religious leaders, and community members, activists, law enforcement, and social service providers for a conversation about the needed change for criminal justice reform in our city and our shared vision going forward. The goal here is to provide a report of baseline data of 3 important initiatives within the Circuit Attorney's Office that were discussed with community leaders during our meeting in July, and in particularly the coming years. We have to look at how we make more effective intake of charging decisions, expanding the use of diversion, and bail reform. So I want to take a time to introduce some of the important leaders that have been instrumental in this. We have people from the Vera Institute. We have the NAACP president. We have the Missouri Baptist Convention leaders, community leaders, religious leaders behind me, and I'm going to let them say some words.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, first I want to make sure that we say to Circuit Attorney Gardner that we really do appreciate the partnership that we formed as far back as July with the notion of criminal justice reform being fully implemented in the city of St. Louis by July 2020. And I think, as you heard, the Circuit Attorney's Office is to a great start. I would leave with just this statement, that we continue to be motivated by the ideal that policing and court enforcement should be driven by public safety to better balance making the community whole, but without putting an undue burden on the offender. The time has passed where we have offenders who shoulder all of the burden within the criminal justice system, especially those nonviolent offenders, those small misdemeanors, and things of that nature. It is extremely important that these individuals have opportunity to fully benefit from the criminal justice systems in any means possible. And that's why we really do appreciate this partnership.
Good morning. My name is Lyndon Bowie. I do serve as president of the Missionary Baptist State Convention of Missouri. And I'm here because I'm really proud to share in this historic moment in the city of St. Louis. And again, I'm proud to be a part of this partnership along with the local NAACP and our Circuit Attorney's Office to bring much needed reform to the criminal justice systems here in St. Louis. Particularly, I am delighted with some of the diversion programs that the Circuit Attorney is offering. Historically, probably from my childhood, we can remember how the criminal justice system had such a hard-nosed tactic with those offenders, even minor offenses, that would cause individuals to have to serve time in jail because they just couldn't afford to pay bail or for whatever small crimes that they have committed. And it had a large impact on their ability to make it in life because of some of the charges and the time that was spent in jail because of their inability to get proper representation or maybe even pay bail to get out of jail. And it affected their employment and education and other things. And this is from my childhood, probably almost 50 years ago. And it still persists to this day. And today marks a historic moment where our Circuit Attorney has announced that there are some plans to create different opportunities for individuals who are connected or find themselves a part of the criminal justice system. The diversion program, in my humble opinion, is one of those things that we have really been pushing for. And I'm proud to say that our Circuit Attorney is working to make that happen so that those minor offendees don't have to go to jail for offenses that tend to clog up our systems and cause our jails and to be overrun with people who really shouldn't even be there. And so these diversion programs, I'm looking forward to seeing the impact that they would have on those light offenders. Of course, those who are really dangerous offenders, she's getting them off the streets. But we're certainly proud of what she's doing. Our convention has been interested in criminal justice for some time now. We have a commission for social justice and criminal justice, and one of our commissioners is here. Reverend Duval is going to come at this time. He's going to add a little bit more.
Thank you, President Bowie. My name is Reverend Philip Duval. I'm the Social Justice Chair of the Missionary Baptist State Convention of Missouri. We also, I want to echo the partnership that we have with the NAACP that believes in civil rights and those social justice issues that impact and affect our community at large. I want to take time to thank personally the Circuit Attorney, who we believe those in the community are constantly under attack. This is about process. It's not about personality. We focus more on the personality of those who are in office that are reforming than we pay attention to the process that affects us. The scales of justice as we see it have not been balanced. That's why we call it criminal justice reform. And we're grateful that we have brought partners in from other parts of the country that can give us this data that shows that it works effectively. Missouri, as we know, and St. Louis specifically in this area, has some challenging numbers that are now being tested. We believe in what this criminal justice initiative is doing. We support it wholeheartedly. And also in our partnership, it should be noted that we hold each other accountable for the actions. So as we look at her numbers and share with her numbers, we are constantly in contact to ensure that this enforcement is not just about words, but it is demonstrated in actions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jami Hodge, and I serve as the director of our Reshaping Prosecution program at the Vera Institute of Justice. And I'm excited to be here today. What I want to talk about briefly is our partnership that's been in place about 1.5 years now with Circuit Attorney Gardner. And I also want to provide a little context about what is happening today and why the announcement she's making and the data she'll be releasing is so important. So first, for those who may not know, the Vera Institute of Justice is a nonprofit criminal justice reform organization that has a long history. We've been around for more than 50 years, and what we're known for is using data to drive policy change. Data-driven approaches in partnership with system stakeholders to drive change. And so this program, though, although Vera has been around a long time, our program is new. And so our Reshaping Prosecution program was started a little over 1 year ago in response to this really historic moment in time that we see both here in St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and that we're seeing across the country, where community members are demanding change in their criminal justice system. They are getting organized, they're becoming empowered, they're making their voice heard at the ballot box, and they're electing people like Circuit Attorney Gardner who reflect their values and who have run on a campaign of changing our system. And so Vera, doing what we had this history of sort of working with folks using data to drive change, thought that this was a time where we should get back into the prosecution space. And so again, about 1.5 years ago, we went to convenings, presented to groups of lead DAs, lead prosecutors throughout the country, and Circuit Attorney Gardner was one of the first to raise her hand and say, I want that. I want your partnership. I want your help. Come into my office, talk to my staff. I'm going to make my entire case management system available to you so that you can analyze the data and that we can use real numbers, real data to drive change. Well, and why is this important? So we know that data-driven change and that data itself is important because it's how we really can understand the scope of the problem. It's data that has let us know about this problem of mass incarceration and how in our nation we are so far beyond any other place on this planet in terms of whom we incarcerate and the rates at which we incarcerate. Data is what tells us that although we are less than 5% of the world's population, we incarcerate somewhere between 20 and 25%. It's data that tells us that nationally, within every 100,000 people, 1,000 people can expect to be incarcerated. And that rate is basically 100 times what we see in other places. It's data that tells us that St. Louis, Missouri first as a state is right along those national rates, that St. Louis County, that Jackson County, other counties are right at that national rate, which is not something to attain to, but it's also data that told us that St. Louis City is more than twice that rate. And so it's data that helps to identify the scope of the problem of mass incarceration, but it's also data that can help us solve it. And so by being open and letting us come in and look at her system and her case management system, not just to understand how her office and the decisions they make impact this problem, it is that same data that will then later judge these programs and these changes that she's making, and that's why what she's doing today is so important. The other piece about this is that Missouri is unique. You know, you have now elected 2 lead prosecutors who ran on platforms of change, but there are 2,300, more than 2,300 prosecutors' offices in this country, and this is just a small number. I think we'd be generous to say that maybe 50 are reform-minded progressive prosecutors. So this is the very beginning of a movement of change. And of those number, the small number of reform-minded progressive prosecutors, there are very few who are doing what Circuit Attorney Gardner is doing today, which is releasing data from her office and making it available publicly. Prosecutors' offices are often known as the black box, and people know that they wield this power, but they have no idea how decisions are made and how that power is used. And this is a very important step in pulling back the curtain and saying, here are my numbers. Here are my numbers on diversion. Here are my numbers on charging. Here are my numbers on the bail reforms we are putting in place. Here they are, and I want you to have them and then use them to hold me accountable as we put these reforms in place. So I just want to congratulate her for being brave, because a lot of prosecutors aren't doing this, and just excited, you know, about all that she's undertaking here in St. Louis, and really grateful for the folks standing with her today, because change is hard, and it cannot be done alone, and it is going to take these voices, these partners, to implement the reforms that are so needed here. So thank you. I just want to say that the data, there's a document that will be available to you all. It will also end up posted on the website that has the actual numbers for the different categories of information that she's releasing. And again, just honored to stand in partnership with her at this very important moment. Thank you.
Circuit Attorney, can you highlight some of the changes that you're making?
Yeah, this is supposed to be a policy announcement.
Well, one of the changes we're making is really looking at diversion and alternatives and how that reduces harm in our community. So what we have implemented with Vera is looking at what we have been doing and who we charge, what we charge, and how we look at what alternatives are appropriate. At the same time, we look at our data so we can focus our resources on those most violent individuals, which is key to focusing our limited resources on those crime drivers, which is also a public safety harm reduction model. So that's key. At the same time, we use data for training. We use data at the same time to look at how we can strengthen our efficiency in the office. So that is key. How do we make better charging decisions? How do we look at how we can give our attorneys the ability and the tools that are needed so when we have that complex case, we can focus our infrastructure on that complex case. At the same time, we use data to inform how we can improve our diversion programs, which have been started recently, about a year. We had to do a lot of overhaul of diversion programs, and how do we increase those numbers? At the same time, how do we get the people in those programs to steer them out of the criminal justice system completely? So we're looking at the recidivism of those individuals on the long term, whether they come back into the system, when we provide social services to the individuals, when we address the underlying issues of lack of education, hopelessness, as well as mental health issues. We're bringing those resources within our office. That's never been done before. How do we address the addiction the opioid crisis in our communities. We're bringing addiction-trained physicians in our office to address the needed for the opioid crisis as well as addiction crisis in our city and our region.
Would you like, I noticed you mentioned cash or bail and bond practices, and just this week, the city of St. Louis is being sued for its cash bail practices. What sort of reforms are you embracing on cash bail?
Well, one of the things we're doing is, as you know, the prosecutor makes a recommendation. So we are involving ourselves in that conversation more, using data. At the same time, we've made a policy change in terms of low-level felonies. We're requesting a summons release instead of issuing a warrant for low-level felony cases. We've been doing that. At the same time, we're working with the courts as well as working with the public defender's office to come up with a better plan how we can look at identifying individuals who are low level, who are not a risk to public safety, not a risk to the community, and seeing if we can come up with a solution to divert those individuals to a lower option of terms of a low cash bond or personal recog. But we have to include all the partners. We can't just do it by ourselves. So we have to work with the public defender's office, the private defense bar, as well as the courts, because the courts make the ultimate decision. So we are working with them, and we're having these tough conversations, but this is the start. But what I've done personally with our office is we are issuing summonses on all low-level felony cases as well as misdemeanors. We've been doing that. So we are taking an active role in this conversation, but it's a bigger conversation that we have to work with our partners in the criminal justice system.
What kind of impact do you think your reform could have on places like the workhouse, where there are a lot of defendants who people feel are just being held there, locked up, simply because they can't afford bail on somewhat low-level offenses? Well, that's crucial. When we looked at the initial, when the workhouse issue came about, and we looked at the numbers of individuals in the workhouse, most of those individuals are not held pretrial. The data shows that most of the individuals are held on probation violations. So diverts that person where that person is no longer on probation because you will be diverted out of that system, which if you look at mass incarceration in Missouri, the #1 driver of mass incarceration is probation violations. Many people think that it's a person who gets prison sentence. No, it's probation. You're coming out with 120 days shock, and you come back and forth, and you're going in and out of the system for years. And so what we are doing is looking at how we can reduce that number in the workhouse with diversion by expanding that program. So we won't have to worry about that person being held, as well as the felony summonses and the misdemeanor summonses, as well as looking how we can educate the bench that in terms of pretrial detention, the risk of an individual simply because they can pay, we have to do a better job of really articulating how we can make our communities safe, which we have to look at the public safety. But at the same time, we have looked at risk assessments and how we are part of that conversation to have a risk assessment to identify whether that person is more likely to go into the criminal justice system. And that's what our office has done. So it's a complex problem, but funding these programs and being a part of these programs that I'm talking about reduces the number overall in the workhouse.
How exactly does diversion affect a probation violation? If diversion is supposed to be pre-conviction and probation is post-conviction?
Well, we have two forms of diversion. We have pre-charge and we have post-charge. In both of those charges, in post-charge, the sentence is deferred. The person goes along the diversion program. Once that person completes our diversion program, the judge will allow that person to withdraw their plea of guilty and will dismiss that case. So they're not on probation.
Right, but you're saying it's supposed to help with probation violations of the leading cause. There's people on probation. That's not going to help with those people.
But they're not on probation in our diversion programs.
I know that. There are already people on probation.
There are already people on probation, but those are, when we expand diversion, most of those low-level offenders that are currently on probation now, we would divert them into diversion where they're not on probation. So that limits the amount of people who are on probation to let the probation officers focus on those individuals that need to be on probation. So that limits the numbers of people who are on probation if we expand these programs, and that's done around the country.
But people are always concerned about how their tax dollars are spent. What kind of costs do these changes incur?
Well, right now, we're saving money. I mean, when you save an individual from going into the workhouse, I mean, you look at that cost when we're holding individuals for just even if you look at the medical care a person receives in the workhouse, that's millions of dollars that right there, pre-trial, that someone is being held, as well as when you're holding individuals for a probation violation, We look at people going in and out. That's money that we are right now having to expend, but when we divert them, we have studies in other jurisdictions like Milwaukee that you save millions of dollars when you use diversion, and that allows the money of the taxpayers to go into preventative services versus this long detention and this in and out of the criminal justice system, which we know is costly. We spend more money in this state on incarceration than education, than social services that address the root cause of why individuals is going into the criminal justice system. And what I'm saying, because I know you guys know I'm a nurse, crime is a public health crisis, and we have to treat crime as such. We have to bring those social services inside the office to address why someone is affecting themselves in the criminal justice system. And what we want to do is when you have that brush with the criminal justice system, if you're a low-level nonviolent offender, we want to get you back on track. Because having this tool that everybody is basically having a downward spiral, an economic death sentence, we're not talking about the violent offenders. We're talking about the individuals that we can get back on track, but we need the resources, and it saves us money over the long term.
What is one program that you have put in place through this partnership with the Vera Institute, and what has the data, both in terms of arrest charges, et cetera, and the money shown about it being effective? You're talking a lot about, these are programs that we've put in place. What's one program you've done, and what have the benefits and impacts been?
Well, I'm going to say this. When you talk about arrest, we have many different factors. When you look at manpower in terms of holding, like I said, I'm not the workhouse. I can't give you the exact statistics, but I can give you an example. We have misdemeanor redirect programs. That's a misdemeanor redirect diversion program where low-level individuals are able to get back on track and move out of the system. At the same time, we have felony redirect programs. We have a younger offenders program, which individuals are 17 to 25. Those are the individuals that their brain is not developed. They're more likely to go further in the criminal justice system, and we are catching them before they go further. Providing services like trauma-informed counseling, cognitive behavior therapy. What we're doing is addressing the early so we will not have to keep incarcerating these individuals. We can look at the state budget, determine how much you will save. We have over 40% of our prison population right now are probation violators that we spend $30,000 a year. So if we save one person, we save 5, you can do the math, $30,000 of incarcerating an individual multiple times, and not just in the Department of Corrections, in the workhouse. So there's many, if we want to talk about numbers, I can get those numbers, but we save a lot of money.
But is that a program that you have specifically put in place because of this partnership with the Vera Institute? I'm just trying to understand what it is that you've done thanks to help from the Vera Institute to develop these programs, or if you're simply pointing to ones that you've done in the past and are now trying to advance or push these programs forward.
And that's a good question. What the Vera Institute showed me with the data that I needed to strengthen the programs that were existing and expand to address how we have help these individuals who are going further in the criminal justice system. What they did with the data is they showed me I needed to have a young offenders program. What they showed me, I needed to have a pre-charge diversion program. What they showed me, I needed to expand pre-plea diversion program. So with the data, it showed me that these things reduce the effects of the criminal justice system long term. This data that the Vera Institute showed me reduces the number of people held in the workhouse and saves the city money. So that's what the data showed me. The data is a snapshot, and this is a continuing program that's going to be going on for a long period of time. So this is a new program that's been in effect. I've only been here for 2 years, but the data has shown us, which they also, if you look at, Vera Institute has done this program in Milwaukee. That was a start. Milwaukee is the only prosecutor office right now that has a 5-year data of what diversions and alternatives have done. What they have in Milwaukee, they have over 86% of their caseload in diversion, and it showed a recidivism rate of less than 5.5%. It also showed, with the help of Vera, that violent crime in the city has gone down. Milwaukee is a similarly situated city to Missouri. So what Vera has shown me that this can work, and it has worked on a longer engagement with a prosecutor who started off this conversation. And now, with my help, we're also looking at doing this in Missouri, but we're doing it in a different way. But Vera has shown me with their data, working with Milwaukee, as well as working with our city, it takes at least 5 years to see, which we know the effects are great because we have other cities that have done this. But prosecutor-led diversion is relatively new around the country, so we have very limited individuals to look to, but we're doing it. And Milwaukee is the greatest example because he's been doing it for over 5 years, and he is successful. The police like it. It's reduced overall crime. It's built trust in the community. It's done a lot of things that we have to address in terms of criminal justice reform.
Do you think the police will like it here?
I believe actually the police officers support that. I mean, we have, of course, we have to educate police on how we do things, but the police support that because what criminal justice reform does is looks at discretion, and it looks at discretion of how we engage the community. And that's what this criminal justice reform issues, like Vera, who are the leaders in this, as well as my office, we want to also talk to law enforcement because actually you'll be surprised, a lot of individuals within the department support diversion.
Help me paint the timeline here. Vera has come in. When were these changes put into place? When do you think we're going to start seeing actual data and impacts from the programs that you've done, these young offenders, these pre-charge? Help us understand what this point in time that you are telling us about today is in this process.
Well, Vera has been in over a year and a half, so they've been in almost as long as I've been in office. And I've put these measures in place day one since I took office. But what Vera has done is looked at our data to help me strengthen my programs as well as look at how I can make it more effective, and we'll continue. We have data of what we've done so far, but there's data to be collected, and we will continue to release that data going forward. So we've already been doing this. We have data. We show the effects of it. Right now, we've screened over 300 diversion cases and over 86% success rate, just in the little time I've been in office and having these programs. So we have the data. That's what we're going to release, and that's what we want to continue to track with Vera, as well as continue to have this transparency of releasing these reports so you can see if it works, and I know it works.
Circuit Attorney, speaking of releasing, that was a strong letter that you released, and we got Jimmy Edwards' response to it. Do you have a rebuttal to some of the things he said yesterday about, for instance, he says Garrity won't be a problem. But what do you just think in general of his reaction?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the public safety director. That was an internal letter that was sunshined, and the letter speaks for itself.
Ms. Garner, two-part question. The president of the police union has called for your resignation and also said you're charged with abuse of power. What's your response to that? And also, where do you think this pushback from your investigation is coming from?
Well, I don't want to respond to something that's so it's ridiculous, and as you know. I guess you're talking about Mr. Rorta, who's over the St. Louis Police Officer Association. He has no credibility, so I'm not going to respond to that. That is false, and that's just a false rhetoric that is put out because that's what they do. And you have to understand, the police union and their business manager, they advocate for a position. They're a bargaining unit for individual officers, and so they're doing their job. But to spread false statements like that, to me, that shows that we have to come together in these times. This is difficult times. When we have issues involving anyone in our community, and it involves the police, we need to come together and we need to have a thorough investigation. We need to work together to be accountable. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna start, pointing fingers at anyone, even the business manager, but he's doing a good job. And, I wonder why people listen to him because he's biased.
Could I please go back to Garrity? Because, not to talk about Jimmy Edwards as a person, but he made a legal argument that I wanted your reaction to. He claims that the urine and the breathalyzer tests will not be withheld because of Garrity, that you will have access to them and it will come out. Do you buy that?
I can't speak to specifics of that case, but as we all know, you can read the law. Garrity proposes some issues in terms of a criminal investigation, and that's all I can talk about with that. Garrity has some issues that makes it difficult for a prosecutor to use certain types of evidence in cases.
Ideally, what should your officer's relationship be with the police department, and how would you characterize the relationship now with the police department?
I believe our relationship is going to be what it is. It's always going to be natural tension with our office and the police department. That's always going to be there. But at the same time, we work day in and day out with the good men and women of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. We work well with them every day. So we know everyone wants to talk about a few individuals, but let's talk about the work that we hold individuals accountable every day, working with the police officers that do a good job. And this is not every officer. This is not the sentiments of every officer, but a few. And so I think that we have to understand, even before me, the last circuit attorney, Jeff Reuter called her the most horrible circuit attorney that he's ever known. So that's the natural tension of the police union, who is a biased unit, and they represent their individual officers well, but they're a unit that they're one-sided. They're not going to be balanced. But the natural tension of the police department is always, it's going to always be there. But I want to say, we work well together. I work well with the chief. I work well with the public safety director. We're going to have issues that we're going to have tough conversations, but we're going to work together.
What's been going on with all these police cases lately? It seems like there have been a large number of officers charged.
You have to ask the police department. I'm just doing my job as the prosecutor.
Were any of those officers on your exclusion list, the 7 felonies, I believe it is, the past 1 month?
I cannot speak to that. As you know, I'm under litigation for a temporary restraining order related to the exclusion list, so I'm limited in what I can say.
Circuit Attorney, you said you work well with Chief Hayden. Your letter yesterday levied some allegations against him and his coming forward so quickly in about 90 minutes to call that shooting an accident. Did he jeopardize the investigation by jumping to that conclusion so quickly?
I'm going to let you think about what the circumstances of that letter, it speaks for itself. I'm not going to speak to what the chief of police has done, but, you know, we have to look at the letter as well as it's an open investigation. And I think that what we have to do right now is we have to work together. This is a tragic incident that happened to a St. Louis police officer, Caitlin Alex. I mean, this young woman's life was cut short, unfortunately, and we have to address what happened on that night. And I think that we have to come together. We have to hold our city accountable for these actions of these officers involved. At the same time, we deserve to give her the fair investigation that's needed in this most complex case. It's devastating. It's devastating for a prosecutor to have to charge any police officer, like it's devastating for a prosecutor to charge anyone in the community. We all are affected by that. And so for someone to think that this is a great day for the prosecutor's office, this is not, because we have to work with the hardworking men and women of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. And guess what? We just want to do our jobs.
Kim, hold on. Hold on. Excuse me for 1 minute. Hold on. Let's be perfectly clear. St. Louis NAACP has a relationship with both the police department and the Circuit Attorney's office, and we've had it for forever. We've been in this town for over 109 years, just about. And we have a working relationship with both. And as the community, we do not see it as a critical issue, the fact that there, from time to time, is disagreement between the Circuit Attorney's office and the police department. The Circuit Attorney's office has a job to do that is to prosecute crimes. The police department has a job to do to investigate and bring them to that office. And we do not, the community, we do not expect that every time the police department brings a case before the Circuit Attorney's office that the Circuit Attorney blindly signs off and prosecutes, nor do we expect the opposite to happen. And the fact that we're here talking about issues for months, we've been sitting in on the diversion court, watching person after person go before a judge and had an opportunity to get their life back together because of the reforms and the programs being put in place. And that's what we're here to talk about. That's what we're here to talk about. And we're hoping that you, as the media, put this information out there, because we need more of the folk who are coming before, that are being arrested by the police for whatever reason, that are coming before the prosecutor's office for whatever reason, to understand that they have a justice system, that we're trying to balance the scales, and they have an opportunity to make restitution. They have an opportunity to have a fair and equitable process, and they have an opportunity to restore their lives. And diversion and some of these other programs are the only way that's going to happen. It's the only way that's going to happen. And if we don't get it out to the community and get them to understand it, they won't take advantage of it. And that's what the day is about.
Yeah, we'll get it out, but you have to understand our perspective. We've got 2 stories here, and we're going to cover both of them.
I understand you are, but to the same degree that for months now, we've been cringing at the reporting that is going on as relates to the disagreements between the prosecutor's office and the city police department. And it is not doing the community any good, because we have a community now that is almost as divided as this nation is on these issues. We got a community where police are, let's be clear, I do not plan to live in a community without police, but I plan to have police to be held accountable like anybody else. We need police officers, but we also need them to be held accountable just like anybody else. And they also need to have a fair opportunity to defend themselves just like anybody else. And I don't think anybody has said, whether it's from the public safety director, whether it's from the mayor's office, or whether it's from the police department, that the only person that would say that the police are not getting a fair shake in the criminal justice system is the president of the Police Officers Association. That's the only person that is saying that. And most criminals will say that they're not getting a fair shake out of the criminal justice system. That's just the lay of the land.
Like this causes a lot of tension between the people and the police department. And here you are trying to work with different programs and offenders and the police department, and then you're given this case that just makes a lot of people angry in our community. I mean, as city leaders, how do you overcome something?
And the way we do it is we talk to the police department, we have relationships with them, we talk to them, and we're asking them, and we ask the circuit attorney's office from time to time to say, hey, listen, you can disagree, we just don't have to disagree publicly. We just don't have to make it a public argument or public debate. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. Let's let the process work its way through. Let's let all of the folks who's charged, whether they're police or not, let's let them work through the system, and let's see if the system does what we say the system is, and that is this fair and balanced justice system, and let's see what comes out at the end. But right now, this discard has to stop. And in a minute, we're going to become more vocal, and more forceful against anybody and everybody, whether it's the media, whether it's the circuit attorney's office, whether it's the police department, that this has to come to an end. It has to stop. We have some real issues to deal with. We are not going to go back to 2000 pre-Michael Brown or post-Michael. We're not going back to that. And all of this stuff is doing is dividing the community, and we don't need a division.
Well, my next question for Ms. Donald was, at the end of the letter, you said you were going to put up a meeting with Chief AE. Has that been set up, and when?
It has been set up.
What unanswered questions do you have, Ms. Gardner, about what happened to Officer Alex and what happened before, what led up to it?
Like I said, it's an open investigation. Her family deserves answers. So does the community.
Is it a question to you whether drugs and alcohol were there, or do you know that's the case?
I can't speak to specifics in the case, but
Your letter spoke to that and said there's probable cause that it was involved. What led you to say that?
The letter speaks for itself. So let's focus on why we're here, and I thank you, because right now I think we're getting off topic, but I appreciate you understanding that we're about reforming our office, we're about building trust in the community, and things that we have done, being transparent, being accountable, and giving people opportunity and reducing harm and public safety for our community. It speaks volumes, and I want to thank everyone behind me. I want to thank Vera Institute. I want to thank everybody out here in the community, because we have to engage the community in this way, have these tough conversations. At the same time, we have to be data-driven. So I thank you for being here.
Please understand that as part of the transparency, sometimes because we don't get access to you all the time, we do have to kind of get off topic.
Just not in this specific case, but what is the process for getting drug tests and those kinds of things after police are involved in these kinds of officer-involved shootings? I know that was a main thing that came out of the Von Garrett Myers case that Jennifer Joyce stated that needs to happen on the regular. So is that happening? Is it a challenge to get those tests on a regular basis?
Well, in an investigation, that's why we call, and Jennifer Joyce was the one that called with the chief prior to me taking office, parallel investigations in this matter to address those issues, because we want to have as much evidence in these complex cases as possible. So that's why we've called for a parallel investigation, and that's why I asked the Board of Aldermen to form a unit in our office called the Independent Investigative Unit. And that's what we've been asking for, that unit since I took office, and we've been pushing that legislation, and I think that these complex issues show the need for that independent investigation unit that we asked for, so. I can't speak to that, but like I said, you know, that's why we want an independent investigative unit, so thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, sir. That helped a little bit. All right.
Was the sun making you crazy with the
Yeah.
I kept looking over every time the sun changed. I saw you kind of went. Like, oh.
I saw it coming across. It's like,
So what you can do. They don't think about things like the whole background
yeah, it was killing me.